The morning sun spilled across the marble walls of Ashcroft Manor, making the enormous mansion look warm from the outside, but anyone who lived inside knew it had been cold for years. Expensive paintings covered every hallway, priceless furniture decorated every room, and sparkling chandeliers hung from ceilings that seemed to touch the sky. Yet none of those things could hide the silence that echoed through the house every single day. The silence had become so heavy that even the servants walked carefully, as if they were afraid to disturb the sadness hiding behind the wealth. No one could have imagined that the next person to walk through the mansion's front gate would not be a business partner, a wealthy guest, or an important investor, but an ordinary cook carrying an old canvas bag and a heart full of quiet compassion. She had been hired for one simple reason: to prepare meals for an elderly man. Yet before anyone realized what was happening, she would become the reason an entire family found life again. If you believe kindness still has the power to heal broken hearts and that everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, share it with someone you care about, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to Echoes of Hope for more emotional stories that remind us humanity is never truly lost. The owner of the mansion was 43-year-old Rowan Mercer, one of the youngest self-made millionaires in the country. Newspapers praised his brilliant business decisions, television interviews admired his confidence, and magazines called him the man who never failed. What the world never saw was the lonely drive home every evening after another successful day. Rowan had built an empire from nothing after losing his mother at a young age. Every achievement came with another sacrifice. Friendships disappeared. Love never lasted. Family gatherings slowly stopped happening until only one person remained waiting for him inside the mansion: his 82-year-old father, Cedric Mercer. Cedric had once been a respected history professor whose laughter could fill an entire room. Age had stolen much of his strength, and grief had quietly stolen the rest. After losing his wife several years earlier, he stopped caring about food, conversations, and even the beautiful garden he had planted with his own hands. Doctors insisted his health problems were becoming worse because he barely ate. Nurses came and went. Professional caregivers followed strict routines but never stayed long because Cedric refused to cooperate with anyone who treated him like another patient on a schedule. One evening Rowan sat alone in his office after another doctor warned him that medicine alone would not save his father. The old man needed warmth, familiarity, and someone who genuinely cared whether he smiled. For the first time in years, Rowan admitted to himself that money could not purchase what his father needed most. The mansion manager suggested hiring a cook who specialized in preparing traditional homemade meals instead of restaurant-quality dishes. Rowan almost dismissed the idea until he received a recommendation for a woman named Maris Hale. Maris was 51 years old. She lived in a modest cottage on the edge of town and had spent decades cooking for schools, churches, and community shelters. She was not famous. She had no culinary awards. She simply believed every meal carried a piece of the person preparing it. After losing her husband many years earlier and raising her daughter alone, she understood loneliness better than most people. On her first morning inside Ashcroft Manor, Maris noticed something no one else seemed to notice. Every clock inside the mansion worked perfectly, but nothing else truly lived. Fresh flowers were delivered daily, yet no one stopped to admire them. The dining table could seat 20 people, but only one elderly man sat at one end while everyone else remained busy elsewhere. Even breakfast arrived with military precision instead of love. Instead of immediately changing the menu, Maris spent her first day quietly observing Cedric. She noticed how his eyes lingered whenever the scent of freshly baked bread drifted through the kitchen. She saw him pause whenever birds landed outside the dining room window. She realized he never refused food because he disliked eating. He refused because every meal reminded him someone important was missing. The following morning she ignored the complicated menu requested by the nutritionist and prepared warm oatmeal with cinnamon, fresh apples slowly cooked in butter, homemade bread, and herbal tea exactly the way elderly people often remembered from childhood. The aroma floated through the mansion long before sunrise. For the first time in months Cedric walked into the dining room before anyone called him. He stared quietly at the breakfast, and something inside him seemed to soften. He took one bite. Then another. By the end of the meal, the bowl was empty. The servants exchanged shocked glances. When Rowan returned home that evening, the head butler informed him that his father had finished every bite. It was the first good news Rowan had received in a very long time. Days slowly became weeks. Maris never forced conversations. Instead, she filled the kitchen with comforting aromas that reminded Cedric of happier years. Fresh soup simmered for hours. Bread baked every morning. Vegetables came from local farmers instead of expensive suppliers. Little by little Cedric began spending more time near the kitchen simply listening to ordinary sounds that made the mansion feel like a home again. Soon he started sharing stories about his late wife. He remembered how she used to hum while peeling potatoes and laugh whenever bread rose higher than expected. Maris listened without interrupting. Sometimes healing required advice. Other times it only required someone willing to listen. The greatest surprise came one Saturday afternoon. Cedric wandered into the abandoned greenhouse behind the mansion. Dust covered broken flower pots, and weeds had swallowed the pathways. He stood there silently before asking for gardening gloves. The old professor had finally decided to care about something again. Maris helped him plant herbs that could later be used in the kitchen. Basil, rosemary, mint, thyme, and parsley slowly replaced forgotten weeds. Every afternoon became another opportunity for Cedric to step outside instead of remaining trapped inside memories. Watching from his office window, Rowan realized he had not seen his father smile like that in years. Still, something inside Rowan remained unchanged. He appreciated Maris for helping his father, but he himself stayed emotionally distant. His days began before sunrise and ended long after dark. He continued believing work mattered more than relationships because success had become the only language he understood. One rainy evening Rowan accidentally entered the kitchen instead of his office. Maris was quietly preparing soup while Cedric laughed over an old family recipe book. The sound stopped Rowan in his tracks. He could barely remember the last time laughter echoed through those walls. Instead of returning upstairs, he sat down. Without ceremony Maris served him a simple bowl of vegetable soup and warm bread. It tasted nothing like the expensive meals prepared by famous chefs during business dinners. It tasted like home. That night Rowan stayed at the dining table nearly 2 hours listening to stories about his parents' early marriage, childhood adventures, and forgotten family traditions he had not thought about since he was a boy. For the first time in decades, the mansion felt smaller, warmer, and alive. As autumn arrived, more unexpected changes followed. The servants no longer rushed silently through the corridors. Birthdays were celebrated together. Extra food was delivered to the local homeless shelter every Friday. The mansion's enormous dining room finally hosted meals where people actually talked instead of eating in silence. Maris never asked anyone to change. She simply lived with kindness until kindness became contagious. Not everyone appreciated the transformation. One distant relative named Victor learned that Cedric's health had improved dramatically. Victor had quietly hoped the elderly man would soon pass away, making future inheritance disputes easier. Seeing Cedric healthier threatened his plans. Victor began spreading rumors that Maris had manipulated the family for financial gain. Anonymous letters arrived questioning her honesty. Some employees even wondered whether the accusations were true. Rowan found himself facing a difficult decision. For years he trusted evidence more than emotions. Instead of immediately defending Maris, he quietly investigated every accusation. The results embarrassed him. Every rumor proved false. Even more surprising, Rowan discovered Maris secretly used part of her salary each month to buy groceries for struggling elderly neighbors without telling anyone. She expected no recognition. She simply believed people should never feel forgotten. Ashamed of his hesitation, Rowan apologized sincerely. Maris accepted with gentle grace, explaining that trust, like bread, needed patience before it could rise properly. Those words stayed with Rowan. He gradually reduced his workload, delegated responsibilities, and began having breakfast with his father every morning. The business world noticed he attended fewer meetings. Investors worried. Competitors celebrated. Yet Rowan discovered something unexpected. His company performed even better because happier leaders made wiser decisions than exhausted ones. Months later winter covered the gardens with sparkling frost. Inside the mansion, however, warmth filled every room. Cedric looked healthier than anyone believed possible. Although age still slowed his steps, hope had returned to his eyes. On Christmas morning the mansion hosted something it had not seen in many years. Laughter. Neighbors, former colleagues, local children, shelter volunteers, and employees gathered around long dining tables covered with homemade food. No one cared about expensive decorations. People remembered how they felt. Near the fireplace Cedric quietly watched everyone enjoying themselves. He realized this was the family he thought had disappeared forever. Not because they shared blood. Because they shared compassion. One evening several weeks later, Cedric peacefully fell asleep in his favorite chair after spending the afternoon reading in the greenhouse. He passed away with complete peace, wearing a gentle smile. The sadness that followed was real, but unlike previous years, it was not empty. It was filled with gratitude. During the funeral, hundreds of people attended. Former students traveled long distances. Neighbors came carrying flowers from gardens Cedric had inspired. Shelter volunteers thanked the family for years of quiet generosity that had begun because of Maris. Rowan stood beside his father's grave, realizing that wealth had never been his greatest inheritance. Love was. After the funeral, Rowan walked back into the mansion expecting to feel overwhelming loneliness again. Instead, he noticed fresh bread baking in the kitchen. The familiar aroma reminded him that although people leave this world, the goodness they plant inside others continues growing. He asked Maris to remain part of the family, not as an employee, but as someone whose place at the table would always be waiting. She quietly smiled, not because she had changed a millionaire's mansion, but because another broken family had remembered what home truly meant. Before we reach the end, we'd love to hear from you. Please comment with the words, "Kindness changes everything." Your message may inspire someone who needs hope today. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of someone you love, or encouraged you to value family over fortune, please like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with others, and subscribe to Echoes of Hope. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need a little hope in their lives. The greatest miracle inside Ashcroft Manor was never the expensive renovations, the luxurious furniture, or the millionaire's success. It was the quiet courage of one ordinary woman who believed every meal could carry love, every act of kindness could heal unseen wounds, and every lonely heart deserved another chance. Long after the mansion's lights dimmed each night, the warmth she had brought into those walls remained, proving that the richest people are not those who own the biggest houses, but those who fill them with compassion, forgiveness, and hope.